Mr. Sitko and Ms. Nahopi'i not to be here this morning because I confirmed that there would be a quorum today, so we could move forward. And unless there's any serious or strong objection, my intention is to recommend strongly to Mr. Sitko and Ms. Nahopi'i to resign from this board. Because simply by them not showing up does not eliminate the sunshine problem. The fact that they're members of the board still makes them subject to sunshine. Kanaka Ole, on the other hand, he's in Oahu, I doubt if anybody will talk to him about Hawaii County real property tax issues. So that's not so much of a legal concern to me. But with respect to Stan Sitko and Lisa Nahopi'i, they cannot be part of this board. There's just no way around that, in my mind. Which means that leaves you effectively, as I understand, with 6 members. I don't know when Mr. Hassi is scheduled to return. So that being said, to achieve quorum, that makes it a little more difficult. I don't know what the frequency of your meetings will be, the length of the meetings. I'm sure everyone has other, especially the members of the public, which we're very grateful, Bob and Yuki, for participating in this. But I know you have other obligations out there. But that's about where we are right now. The way I look at it, you're a committee of 6, which requires 5-member quorum. In terms of voting, that's interesting, because on the voting part, normally when boards and commissions are created, in the language of the bill, it indicates what will constitute a majority vote. And it's either one of 2 ways. Number 1 is a majority of the total membership of the board, which means that it's 5 no matter what. If 5 guys show up at a meeting, all 5 have to vote one way for business to pass. The other is a majority of the members who are present. So in other words, if 5 show up like today, 3 votes carries action. That wasn't spelled out. I don't believe it was spelled out anywhere in the bill. So where that leaves us, you revert back to Roberts, in my opinion. So I think 3 out of 5 carries, unless specifically pointed out otherwise. So, Ms. Crawford, may I ask, is there any other issue or question that you as a chair would like me to address?
I may have a question, but if it's okay, I would let Ms. Willie go first.
Okay, a couple questions. On the quorum, you said we'd need 5 out of 6. It's not.
Quorum is 5 out of 9, because I think this board was created with 9 members. So quorum is a majority of the total number of positions to which the board is entitled.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of when one does not have a quorum present, I know there were changes in the Sunshine Law that allowed for, it doesn't mean you suddenly stop if Fresh says he needs to leave or go someplace. And I just wondered if you could sort of run through that line. I know we're, for example, allowed to take public statements, we're allowed to have some discussion, but I know we can't vote. But could you refine the line of what we can do and can't do?
I believe that you can continue to take public testimony, but I'm not certain that you can deliberate towards a decision. And clearly you cannot make a decision.
Right.
No.
Okay, I know at another meeting, and I forget who brought it with us, that we could discuss what was on the agenda without, anyway, I think that's something, can we?
Hold on a second. Peter, can you grab me volume 2 HRS, the pocket part, and the hard copy, please? I don't know if you have one back there, would be good. Thank you. Yeah, there was a recent amendment to Sunshine that allows the meeting to move forward, but my recollection is that it does not allow deliberation or decision making, but I might be wrong.
Okay, I know there's sort of a really fine line so that we get that clear. And then in terms of any possible changes we might make going forward to the council, for example, to replace some of these members and what our different options are. I mean, we can go in and request a different number. I mean, to what extent do we, if we were to change, we could do one change and just say it's a 6-member or 7-member, whatever we want. We're not obligated to have, I mean, that was something Nancy and I worked on, maybe 9 would be good. Where part of that was to accommodate staff like Stan and Lisa. And if we were to say, take those positions, and Dina, and take those persons out, the staff people, then that would, it might be that we're fine with a lesser number, and then we just have a different number that would be for quorum and move forward. And then, let me just ask them, lastly, just in terms of Nancy, I'm assuming we don't have a sunshine problem with Nancy if she can't discuss taxes the rest of the time as the director.
That's an excellent question, and because of that, and because the council decided to put Nancy on this board, she effectively would be prohibited from discussing any real property tax matters, not only with the rest of these board members, which includes you, Councilmember Woolley, and Councilmember Onishi, but all other members of the Hawaii County Council as well, because that will constitute a serial communication with respect to their communication with you.
Okay, and we wouldn't want her to be a serial member. Okay, so, and in terms of, so let's talk about who, we could reform this as a, I'm just trying to look at time. In other words, I feel that we're trying to move some of these things ahead. What are the most expeditious ways to do that without putting our decisions in jeopardy? And what our options are. So we can go get other members or, anyway, what options do you see for us in terms of membership and in terms of keeping in mind, I know Nancy and I felt that we really needed to move this as quickly as possible in order to get some things done for the next year. So any input that you have would be appreciated.
I don't, we were not consulted about these issues at the council level, so I'm just simply
Okay.
reporting to you
Okay.
what the issues are after the bill is passed.
Right, but I'm just saying, here we are, so let's figure out going forward. We can change, keep it at we can go in and change the number of people on the, on it and change that. We need to deal with Nancy. I mean, Nancy can be sitting in your seat rather than sitting up here. And basically leading us. I think what you're saying is we can't have anybody in the administration unless we want to take them out of their job, subject them to the sunshine law. So,
Correct.
I don't know whether there is anyone, if we were to, anyone in the department that would be possible. Maybe I have a question here for Nancy. Is there anyone in the administration where being impacted by the sunshine law would not, where they wouldn't otherwise be discussing things with the council, and where it wouldn't be a problem that they were on the board and being subject to the sunshine law? Or is that even advisable? Maybe it's not inadvisable. I'm just looking at should we just assume that your department people should all be sitting out there and not up here? And what's safe?
I guess this task force was created by council, by resolution, and I certainly want to honor and respect that. And so if, in determining options, one of the ones we determined is that I can, compliance with the resolution, I can serve my role, and I would not be speaking to county council on real estate, on real property tax issues. That, you know, I don't know that this is what was originally intended, but it is what was created. And I don't know, Mr. Ashita, if you can, we are here today with a committee that was created by the council by resolution. I don't know, can you tell us what then, how changes to this resolution might be made?
Well, I think that Ms. Crawford and the Finance Department has always been more than open and willing to work with the council in any way that is reasonable and in the best interests of of everyone. But on the question of how to, in terms of membership, its formation, who to be part of it, I mean, that's the council's call, because this was created by resolution. We're here today, as Ms. Willie pointed out. So if there's going to be any changes, which you don't have to, we could move forward today as, but I'm going to have Sitco and Lisa resign. They have to. I mean, there's just no way around that.
Okay, I mean, I would prefer that Nancy be on the board, but I just want to know what that compromises. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Lincoln, when the past council created the ad hoc committee, okay, we had Nancy, we had Stan on that ad hoc committee. So what you're saying is that they were, I guess, obligated with the Sunshine Law during this ad hoc committee then, correct?
Did that ad hoc committee function within Sunshine or not? I wasn't part of that.
We did not operate as a Sunshine Committee. Now, perhaps we should have, and we erroneously didn't. I'm not sure about the task force. However, I believe that during that entire time, there was no discussion, no real property tax discussion brought before the council, particularly because the two council members of that ad hoc committee, it was sort of prohibited. And so we did the work of the committee, had a final report, and then that was presented to the council after the committee had closed.
Was that ad hoc, who created that former ad hoc committee? The council?
Yeah, it was council. It was either Councilman Hoffman, which I think was,
And
or Brittany Smart.
Brittany
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah, we were not consulted in that process.
Because in an ad hoc committee, you have 3 meetings, correct?
So that was like a permitted interaction group, like the 3-meeting ad hoc committee?
Right.
Yeah, I was not aware of that or involved in that process, but if that's what they did, that would actually allow discussion outside of Sunshine. In other words, creating an ad hoc committee, the 3-meeting permitted
Right.
interaction group that you're
Right.
talking about,
Correct.
Councilmember Anishi, is a legal, legitimate, effective way of allowing substantive discussion outside of Sunshine. So just hearing what you're telling me now, it sounds like that was okay, that was legal, what occurred, because it wasn't a permitted interaction group. This is different. This, you are the board.
Right. So
Yeah.
my question is, we should maybe dissolve this and you come up with a new resolution as creating a ad hoc committee instead.
Right. I mean, what my
Yeah.
wondering is if we, Nancy could stay on and we could start still working in this format without bringing anything to the council on real property until we get the ad hoc format set up, until we get that approved.
But then I think, what transparent wise, or like openness, if we start discussing and we start talking and then now we dissolve it, I don't think that would look good to the public. I think we should, from right now,
Do the ad hoc.
yes. You want to?
I remember Pete having a hard time, excuse me, with the way the ad hoc was implemented, where none of the information I understood could go back to the council until it was the final resolution because of partially the Sunshine Law, that they could discuss it by forming it that way. But at the end, when we were all done with the committee, Pete didn't think that was the way to go because it should be more on a progressive basis, addressing the council, letting them know what's going on. And he said a couple of times that if he'd understood the ad hoc, he would not have gone that way. Now, I'm just putting it out. I think that Pete should be, somebody should talk to Pete and get his, but he's not here, so. But I never heard any mention of sunshine problems with the way it was formed.
Okay, because,
Thanks.
yeah, because what I'm looking at, because in the ad hoc committee, there was Nancy and Stan, right? And now that was allowable, it seems like. But now with this task force, now Stan cannot be on because of going to be restricting his job, his duty, right? And then it might hurt also Nancy for her position, right? And so we don't want them to get into that situation. So,
Well, I guess I need clarification. My understanding is Ms. Willie's resolution did not create a permitted interaction group. It actually created a new board. Am I mistaken? Maybe if I may address Ms. Willie, Madam Chair. The way I read the resolution is it created what in effect is a separate advisory board.
Task force, and part of the reason was the recommendation that we not do this as an ad hoc because of the way that's set up, that you come and you sort of say you're forming it is your first time, your second time is you sort of say what you're investigating or the report, and then the third time, so you're very restricted. We'd have to do we couldn't do it on a progressive format. So when Nancy and I met and were sort of setting it up, the idea was we were going to take certain areas in particular that she wanted to implement as soon as possible so that we could deal with those. So just in terms of the ad hoc, if we were to stay as we are, as a task force or as whether it's under the Sunshine Law as a board, let's sort of talk about the pros and cons and what the problems would be going forward in that format. There are pros and cons either way, so I just want to really that we evaluate the alternatives. You have any comment on that? So let's then go ahead.
well, like you mentioned, what would be the pros and cons? I think if we stick it with this way and do the Sunshine Law, then Nancy gets kind of restricted with her duties, right? Because then she won't be able to mention anything outside of to the public or to other council members if they had any questions about real property tax. Correct, Lincoln?
That's correct.
Right, and so I think that's where we shouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
Now, my question to Lincoln is that, okay, this board was created by resolution, so does it have to be, I guess, following the Sunshine Law?
Yes, the Sunshine Law definition of sunshine boards is any organization or group that's created by legislative act.
I see. So if we did it like as a communication, that would have been better?
No, I
No,
think
same thing?
the fact that you ran it through the council and its agenda and it was voted upon by the council members created a sunshine board.
I see.
Which, as you said, does have its advantages in terms of that what we are is promoting more transparency. I'm not sure in terms of Nancy sitting where you are, you know, obviously we're working with the administration. You know, I don't have, I feel Nancy and I that we all work really well together, and whether she's sitting there or she's sitting here, if that's something that would, how she feels about that, or she as department head or administration. In other words, moving forward as a task force, if we're subject to the Sunshine Law, and we stay this way, that moves you over to where Lincoln's sitting.
I would only say, and you're, I mean, maybe this is partly a legal issue. Yeah, you can move me over to where Lincoln's sitting, I guess, and in some kind of advisory capacity. The resolution, reads, "Be it resolved by the Council of the County of Hawaii that it hereby establishes a real property tax stakeholders task force under the direction of the finance director to address those recommendations contained in the International Association of Assessing Officers report." That in your notebooks, that's the first document, and that's why I think that's important for us, because that is what we're here to operate under. And so for this organizational meeting, I felt like that was an important document. So that being there, when we talked about that we could not continue to function in the finance department and the real property tax office with Lisa and Stan, though they are named here, being a part of this task force, it seemed most logical for me to stay on the task force as it is under my direction. That it's a little stuck here, I guess I would say.
Right, so either you stay on it and you can handle that, or I'd say we make a change in this and that we change that wording so that you're here in an advisory capacity. I like the idea of being the transparency. So, and having dealt with working on drafting another ad hoc committee, I'm very aware of the restrictions and the problems in doing that. So I'm not saying we may not have to go back to the council and make changes, because we do have Ryan on here. I mean, we need to address some of the things here, but I'm really just trying to look at what our options in best format.
Okay, I guess this question back to you, Lincoln. So, to me, I think the cleanest way is to go back to the council, get this amended, because we need to take out some of these names that is on the board, right?
That's one option.
Yeah.
You could move forward now because you have quorum.
Right.
So one option, if you're looking at the range or the spectrum of options, number one is do nothing.
Yeah.
And you can still do whatever it is that the resolution says you do. However, we've now pointed out what are some of the challenges you may have down the road, making quorum. Nancy not being able to discuss with either you, Mr. Anisha, or you, Ms. Willie, as well as the other members of the council, any matter related to real property taxes.
Correct.
So those are the most significant challenges. Another option a little farther down the road is what Ms. Willie just suggested, going back to the council and either amending it so you now become a committee of 6 or 5,
Right.
or what have you.
Correct.
Or find replacements for Stan and Lisa, and maybe even Nancy.
Right.
So that's another option. It's completely, really, we're here because the council has directed us to be here by resolution.
No,
We're just responding to the
Okay.
legislation.
Thank you. But also, what about the corp council? Would that also restrict that person?
Well, by putting a corp council on there, it creates all sorts of problems. Like if, for example, if you were to amend this resolution and put my name in there,
Right.
it would just break my heart because I would never be able to talk to you fresh. And we've been doing that our entire lives. And that would
Okay,
lead
you're
to
wrong.
complete depression on my part because, we go so far back fresh, me and you. But I think that, all kidding aside, that's where it gets problematic. When you start putting, if you're all legislators on a board, that's great. But when you start mixing administration people with legislators, you can see the problems that, I think the unintended consequences that ensue.
Okay, well, I would suggest is that we do like a 5-member board with Mr. Hussey and the 4 of us. And we have Nancy and her staff with Corp Council on the other side as advisory, to us. And then we can work it that way, but then you would have to amend your resolution.
I agree, and ultimately, it's not going to be us deciding, it'll be the full council will decide on the amendments, and it will come before the public, and we will have public input into this. And just by way of background, so that it's clear, is that this is something that Nancy and I worked on, because we wanted it to be really showing that it was the council and the public and the administration working together. And in some ways, I think just because of changes in the council and changes in relationship, I think there's less, I don't care whether I'm sitting there or sitting here. I mean, I think that we can, and I realize that saying where you're sitting is really sort of an abbreviation for whether you're a member of the board or not a member of the board. But I think that what Fresh is saying, that I go back and make an amendment to this, that we do get additional input and also from Nancy or Corp Council and everyone else that has something to say, and I think that we'll just try to move it along as quickly as possible. And so we do this in the proper way, and otherwise things that we accomplish might get undone, and we don't want to do it the wrong procedure. We were trying to do it in the most consensus building, most cooperative fashion, and there really isn't the appropriate format for that. So just so the public understands, well, why were they trying to do it in this way, that it was Nancy and I and each of us in consultation trying to work on what would promote the quickest resolution in terms of something that's very important. And I do appreciate what Mr. Price said. I think that just to reinforce under the Sunshine Law, or what is allowed for an ad hoc committee, there are very certain limitations that would make it difficult for us to move in a progressive fashion, and in my mind it makes it less advantageous.
Lincoln, I had a question about the Sunshine Law because obviously I've never read it. When you talk about sunshine, it's very specific then that say 2 council members cannot discuss upcoming legislation, or is it less than a simple majority can't get together and do that? I don't understand, because it seems like if it's that very restrictive, it's the state sunshine law, not Hawaii County. What happens on the other islands in that respect?
Thank you, Mr. Price. The Sunshine Law is a state law that applies to all state boards as well as county boards. So that state Sunshine Law applies to all of the islands. When you're talking about, you are correct, when you started off in saying that 2 members of any board, whether it be the council or this board, you can talk about board business, you can talk about real property taxes outside of Sunshine, which means that you're having coffee in a coffee shop, let's say it's you and Miss Willie. You can do that legally, no problem, as long as 3 things do not occur. Number 1 is that you don't commit to vote. You don't say, I'll tell you what, Margaret, I'm going to vote this way. Number 2 no-no is You cannot seek a commitment to vote, saying, hey Margaret, I want you to vote this way. And number three, which is it's more recent advent in the Sunshine Law, but it is the most problematic, is by virtue of you and now Margaret talking in the coffee shop about real property taxes, both you and Margaret cannot now, from here on forward, speak with the other board members about real property taxes unless it's in a properly noticed meeting like this. In other words, that relationship you've created with Margaret now will only allow you and Margaret to discuss board business privately in the future. I know it's sometimes difficult to conceptualize, but I've told the council this. Council members have heard me say this. I'm not going to deny that the Sunshine Law is very complicated. Some people call it a pain, but I think we all agree that it serves a very good purpose to promote transparency. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying, it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Thank you very much. I understand the Sunshine Law from other states, so I was on a council there, and so I understood that. There it wasn't as restrictive as here. It was, of the 7 council members, 3 could sit down as long as you didn't vote and didn't ask for a vote, those same objections. But I didn't realize it was that restrictive to go in and say, exclude Nancy from her actually doing her jobs. But then I remember we had an auditor that sat out there, not up here. Thank
Mr. Price, that's a great observation you made, because when we surveyed all of the Sunshine Laws in all of the states, Hawaii actually has perhaps one of the most restrictive Sunshine Laws in the country. The trade-off, if you will, is our penalty provision is perhaps the least onerous. In some states, there are prosecutions, 48-hour jail terms we saw in the state of Florida for council members or legislators who violated Sunshine there. So lucky we serve Hawaii fresh. So that's sort of the trade-off. We have a strict law, a restrictive law. However, there has never been any prosecution ever in the state of Hawaii for a Sunshine in recorded history in the state of Hawaii. That's the trade-off. Our penalty provision, our enforcement provision is relatively not as onerous as other states.
Thank you.
Okay, a clarification, just in terms of if 2 people speak, like for example, just on our regular council and 2 of us speak, I talked to so-and-so about one bill coming up and then later something else, a bus thing, I talked to this other person. So it's not like you have suddenly who's your buddy for the rest of the council term. And that Fresh and I are the only 2 that talk, and everybody knows they can't talk to us because he's my buddy, okay?
It's issue by issue, not person by person.
Issue by issue. So I also thought, when I was thinking, sort of processing like Bob's question, I wouldn't be so sure if it's like real estate property, we could no longer talk to somebody else, but it might be on, I was reading through the 40 recommendations. Here's one recommendation, and it had to do with, something in terms of agriculture. Another had to do with how you do appraisals. One could talk. I mean, maybe we just decide that as a board that we're small enough that we aren't going to talk among ourselves, and we are just going to basically, other than where's the meeting and sort of generalities, commit that we are going to just stay and not buddy up on something, because otherwise I think it becomes, Fresh and I talk, or you talk, and if there's how many of us who's left out, I would feel more comfortable, I'm just saying, is that if we do go that way, that we really just try to limit ourselves to talking when we are as a board. I'm not saying that legally we couldn't do otherwise, but I think that if we had a small board, that it makes more sense to just commit to that we exist when we're together, and that otherwise we don't. And if we have issues and questions, any of us then can go to Nancy and talk to someone. And then in terms of corporation counsel, I know I had some questions about that back then. I mean, basically, I tried to honor whoever, the administration wanted on this task force. But anyway, let's just move forward. And I don't know if anyone else has input, but just sort of, if we do go this way, that we pretty much try to just not be discussing things with other members outside and stay on course, but feel fully at liberty to, if somebody has questions, to go, to the Nancy or whoever else they feel off the board might be helpful.
May I ask the council a question?
Absolutely. Would you speak about
Mr. Shida, in matter of conflict of interest, I told you I own 14 residential houses, lots, condominiums. Would I be in conflict being on this board or whatever? I haven't read the thing, so I don't know what.
I think by virtue of you being a property owner, I don't think that per se puts you in conflict, because I'm assuming that most of us are also property owners. If your question, perhaps there may come a time when a discussion is focused on perhaps certain exemptions or benefits, looking at whether it be residential rentals or commercial rentals, whatever properties that you may have a more significant or a greater interest in. I think we should address that on a case-by-case basis, but I don't believe that by virtue of your ownership in and of itself would necessarily create or rise to the level of conflict such that you cannot serve. That's just my off-the-cuff opinion on that, but thank you for raising that.
I just have one question. For today's meeting, we have another agenda item on this meeting. If we go forward and address our second agenda item, and I'm in the role that I'm in today, I'm in this position until and if the county council should take some other action, correct? But at
Yes.
that point, if they took some other action and I'm no longer a member of this task force, then anything that we've done while I was here it's done, and then I'm off the task force and thereby kind of relieved of that connection?
Yes, whatever business you transact today is not eliminated or erased by virtue of a subsequent amendment by the council. And then your departure, what I believe to be perhaps your departure from this board, will then relieve you of any, and the board of any restrictions regarding the Sunshine Law and your ability to discuss board business with them. In other words, you go back to your normal role.
Thank you.
And I think that was what I was trying to say, is perhaps, whether it was one meeting or two, taking advantage of while Nancy's here, and that she just has to be confined in whatever way until she is off of this or resigns. And that was my other question, is just, I was thinking perhaps we should, the other two, Lisa and Stan, should resign immediately. I would probably encourage that. And I would say after Nancy feels that she has, at this meeting, or however you want to do it, that she would as well, whether she should resign or wait for the council. I think it's just as easy to, as soon as, before you do something that would put you in conflict with what you do on this board, that you resign or take whatever action is appropriate.
But then, Lincoln, but if they all resign, but then we won't have quorum.
You can have quorum, presently as written, you need 5 members.
Right.
So if Mr. Hussey is still, he's
Well,
not
if-
here today, but he's the 5th member. You mean quorum today or quorum in the future?
Well, yeah, but because if then it ends up just 5 of us, and we're gonna have to make sure that all 5 come to this
Yes.
meeting, right? In order to do work. But then if one of the 5 cannot make it, then we cannot have any
That's-
votes or
that's
any
correct.
decisions done.
But I think what Ms. Willie was talking about, Ms. Willie, you might correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're okay moving forward today with Nancy participating as part of the board because, and whatever decisions you make today, and from looking at the agenda, it doesn't seem like you'll be making any substantive decisions such that would rise to the level of something that would be reported back to the council. It just seems, you're restricted by the agenda. And the only other item on there besides our discussion now is process for addressing recommendations contained in the report. So that's more just organizational stuff. I think Nancy can participate. That's all you were legally able to do anyway. Then as we move forward in the future, from what I'm hearing you say, Ms. Willie, is an amendment may be imminent, but it doesn't wipe out what you guys can do today, and we can make use of the time today.
Okay, but then at 10 I need to leave, so
Oh, I see.
they're gonna have to be with 4, and they cannot make any decisions once I leave. And you folks
Yeah.
only can do
That,
discussion.
that's correct, and that was why I was informing you about
Yeah,
that, in the
right.
hopes you might be able to change your schedule.
Yeah, and I
But
couldn't.
since you couldn't, okay. Then,
Maybe we ought to be moving on
Yeah.
while Fresh is
Yeah,
here
I
since.
think I'm Powell then.
And can you please push that clock back a little so Fresh can't see what time it is? But I do want, at some point, Lincoln, and you can do this after Fresh leaves, is just, can we go over those nuances and where it is lower than the change in the law?
You bet, Ms. Willie. You call me anytime or
Okay.
email me. We work on this.
Okay, but I mean, I just want to skip right now to item 2 and maybe come back to this after.
Oh,
I
okay.
just want to take advantage, because I didn't know Fresh was heading out, so I'd like to turn it
Okay,
over.
I'll be around. I'll be around.
Okay, turn it over to Nancy right now.
okay, then, having completed up to this point, and thank you very much, Lincoln, we pretty well discussed what this committee is and what the impact of sunshine is on here. So our second item on the agenda is to discuss and determine perhaps a process for addressing the recommendations contained in the IAAO report. I'll make a brief statement, and then this is really something I was hoping the committee could deliberate. In your notebooks, again, I'll point out, and we've mentioned that there was a council ad hoc committee. So there is a report. The report had 40 recommendations, quite a range and some rather repetitive. The finance department back in 2012 responded to those. That's when the study came out. We made a response that addresses some of those, but in very general terms, not 40 by 4, item by item. The task force that met, Pete Hoffman and Brittany Smart's task force, wanted to prioritize those items. And I would think that one thing this board might want to do is, I think, and there was an intent at one point, that Mr. Hoffman's hope was that the work of the ad hoc committee would not be lost, that in fact there would be, they set various priorities and you might in fact want to work with those priorities. One other item I'll just mention, it's sort of competing with that task, which is clearly set forth as the purpose of this task force, is that we have a council member who has submitted several bills to council to amend Chapter 19 and various aspects of the county code. The council has deferred those and recommended that they be considered by this committee. So I'm just mentioning that so that other people know that that's out there as well in determining what process you might want to follow. And at that, I would just soon leave it open to all of you for your discussion.
Nancy, on that comment about another council member suggesting changes to chapter 19, those changes or requests are going to come to this meeting for what purpose? Prior to going to the council, or after they come from the council, or to be used in conjunction with what we're going to do? Do you know?
Would one of the council members like to address that? I mean, I can speak to that, but I'm not on the council.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Brenda Ford has written to a couple, I'm not sure whether they're bills, resolutions, but they've been referred, bills, and referred to us on specific issues here. And so instead of taking them out of context, the council felt that it would be best to refer them here and discuss them more comprehensively in terms of any other related issues. We do have a report on our county council every time we do a bill or a resolution. A staff member, there's that person, there's a report that's written up about that. And I think it might be nice to make that available to get a copy of that, each of those bills where there's something from the council itself being referred here, so it can, our board can review that. So that's it. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, that would be sufficient at this point.
I think Ms. Ford was going to prepare something that was going to refer her amendments to this board.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that also getting not just getting the bill to us, I think it would be helpful if we would, if there are this bill or moving forward, also have a copy of the council report, which is a public document, and it says a little bit, shows the discussion and just gives a little bit of an idea. If someone says, I think this is appropriate to pass on, or I think, it's not appropriate, so the public.
I agree that all information related to it should come forward. We're actually, Ms. Ford has introduced 3 different bills that amend one portion or another of Chapter 19. One of those, the most recent one, has actually been formally forwarded to us by the chair of the Finance Committee. The others have not, but I think it is the intention to do so, to formalize that forwarding to the committee. My feeling is that part of what today needs to be about is, you have the very basic in the resolution directive to address these 40 items. You have, and then you have other items coming in, and I think as a committee it would be helpful in determining an agenda going forward, if nothing else, how all of you think that perhaps we should proceed with addressing the responsibilities of the task force.
Okay. One of my thoughts is if we're going into do an amendment, that I would actually provide in the proposed amendment, memorialize that process of possible referrals, because that's not in the stakeholder task force. I mean, basically, the original resolution was written by the previous council with sort of blanks who would be on it, and then we sort of filled in. So one question is just, do we want to accept referrals from the council? Are we okay with that? And if so, I think the public will be able to weigh in it, but I would like to mention that in the amendment. And I do want to, I know that Fresh is leaving and let you talk, but I would also wondered if today we might just sort of, although Fresh is gone, review that list of 40 and just sort of what they are. And I think right now, we're only responsible to be reviewing those 40 recommendations if you read this in a narrow way.
Yes, please.
That's what I'm looking at right now in the high priorities, the short terms from the ad hoc committee. And a lot of them looks like it's more within the administration and staffing wise, like filling in positions or having course or what is that? Like having training courses for the staff and so forth, and then like hiring one ag specialist or having an ag specialist, and then you know, changing the vacant funded positions to be funded and so forth. So isn't that kind of like what majority of this high priority is?
Right, because they went for short-term high priority first.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So I you know, to me, you can give us an update of like, yeah, of what's happening with this high priority list.
Okay, so for a future meeting, we can start with an agenda that basically, for the next meeting, would start working through the prioritized list as it came from the ad hoc committee, in terms of whether it's a report from administration or you know, whatever's appropriate to these items. So-
But I think just in terms of our second agenda item, that we can sort of look at sort of what are those on that list. Sort of the process for addressing these. Some of these are, as Fresh is saying, basically really internal to you. I mean, I just, in terms of coming over here and doing this, I don't see any problem with just that we sit here and just sort of run down what these recommendations are. We're not acting on them, we're just sort of understanding. This is what, here we are in terms of the process for addressing these recommendations, going through these recommendations, and just, you know, discussing where we're at on them. I did that this morning, and I sort of, like you said, a lot of these are really internal, and try to do what we can to move this process forward. And Fresh, you could listen to the tape at a later date.
Madam Chair, I just got the report today. I didn't know what's going on, but may I ask a question? When this report was given to the council, what did the council do? Did they accept that, or they rejected that, or?
They basically, because it comes in the form of a report, they accepted the report and it was provided to them. And the next action that was recommended was the creation of this task force, or a task force of some kind.
So what does the council want us to do? Recommend that they accept it in the provisions of that report?
Yes. Address the recommendations. I'm not sure the definition of address. As we see it.
Madam Chair, can I quote on that? On the recommendations, it's actually, my understanding was to look at the recommendations set out in, if it's short-term, high priority, what has been done, what's going to be done, and what can we do as a committee maybe to help to make recommendations to the council. So if it's changing Regulation 19, or it's just suggesting after you read through the data, maybe another approach to something. But it's actually reviewing each one in its priority realm, and then coming up with, Nancy or Stan, did you get this accomplished? If not, why? Or if this is accomplished, let's move on to the next item. and just go through all 40 with the understanding we'll do short-term high priority and so on and so on. I hope that's in line what you thought, Nancy. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to some extent, some of these are internal, like getting staffing and getting training, that's sort of one track. There are others that I went through and sort of identified that would take council action or state action, and I don't really, I think that where we can be following several different tracks at the same time, we should do so. There are a couple things here that really involve state legislation, and I wouldn't mind looking at some of those where actually the timing, that we take that into account. So I was trying to sort of not just go by what number they are, but also let's look at which ones are internal, that was with the department, and then some that might take a longer time to implement, that we wouldn't necessarily not deal with number 5 before we've dealt with completed number 1 through 4.
On one issue that I was still under the impression was going to be the start of this was looking at the agricultural aspect, the complete aspect of it, and all of the recommendations, all the regulations, and look at that, because agricultural is actually on a year-to-year basis. But now that we're just now coming here, it's almost too late, because to act on agricultural, you have to have the data to the assessor's office before the 31st of December, unless it's a dedicated. So when you go into that, you have time constraints. So, and I'm saying that it's almost September. There's not much we can get accomplished between now and the end of the year if we want to do something along that line.
I'm not sure I want to take time to get into that. I do have a couple points to make, and that was an interest. There is also, September 1st is a significant deadline related to any agricultural work, and that doesn't mean it all has to stop, but it does change things that we are passing September 1, which we can discuss further at another meeting. But I guess I'm getting here from people that we would, we want to go through the recommendations, in order, and also perhaps another track following at the same time, whether it's in a subcommittee or by some other mechanism. Each meeting can be more than one thing, if that's what the committee wants.
Madam Chair, I guess for me, I guess we discussed about this prior, like before this task force was created. But I think finance had certain categories that you really wanted to work on first. And so I would suggest is that maybe we should follow within the scope of what the department wants and work on that first. And like doing amendments to or recommendations to the full council to do either like exemptions or whatever, reclassifying whatever the zonings and so forth. But I think that's what we should move forward first.
And reinforcing what you said, I think both Nancy and I felt, starting with in terms of what area it would be agriculture. Again, if you don't mind, Fresh, after you leave, that we just look at what these 40 are. There may be some that are no longer relevant in terms of what we've just been saying, and look at it in terms of the organizational process for addressing them.
My only comment to that, Margaret, is that I'm still a little uncomfortable with continuing discussion at all. We can ask Mr. Yoshida to confirm. I understand what you said, is that there have been changes to the law that allow us to sit here and continue discussing, but I would like some other confirmation from Mr. Yoshida before we do that. Otherwise, for me, the most conservative thing is that we would end the meeting.
I looked at the HRS provision, the amendment that was made. It only allows you to continue a meeting without a quorum for the limited purpose of receiving public testimony. No discussion, no decision-making. So, looks like once Mr. Nishi leaves, that's it for this board.
Okay, that's what I wanted the clarification
So,
Okay, so I'll give you folks 5 more minutes.
of. Okay. Okay, Nancy, you have 5 minutes to run through this. Let's go. I mean,
no, we're talking, today's purpose is to come up with the process we wish to
Okay.
follow. And so on that, I mean, the notes that I've just made is a recommendation to go through these as they are prioritized from the ad hoc committee, so that we count each one off and we have checked into it, whether it's asking administration, what's the current status, or it refers to action that we might need to take. Before the next meeting, people will have had an opportunity here to actually look at the materials we gave out today. Then I understood Margaret wants to see if we can't have more than one track going at the same time, so that we're perhaps addressing some certain bills brought forward or something else at the same time, as part of any given meeting. And then Fresh also commented on looking at priorities either brought forward, I guess, either by the council or by the administration was the point that I felt you were making.
okay, so let me just say, if the first thing on the agenda would be to review the recommendations from short-term, whatever, from the ad hoc committee and run through them, and I think we can sort of look at them, which ones are no longer, just run through what they are. Some of them I don't even understand what they mean, okay? And just see, so we understand where they are, and that we do that first, and then would next sort of take, in terms of the recommendations, which ones we're going to focus on, or how we're going to focus, or if we're just going to take ag-related, or however we're going to do it for the following meeting. And then also 3, addressing I would like to have on there any referrals that have been made, so we look at them and see where they fit into where they fit into this list of priorities, and whether they ought to be, how they should be handled.
Any other comments you'd like to make right now, while we finish this
Just
real quick?
one last one, because I sat in on the other one. Could we get a report then from your staff on a number of these that Fresh was talking about? Then we can, for the first meeting, have the real property or finance department go through and say, okay,
Yeah.
here's where we're at with this, here's where, because some of these are staffing requirements by 30th of November.
Of last year.
Of last year. So just for them to bring us up to date, and then we can start getting into, because I think we can eliminate a number of these
That's what we all.
without putting a lot of time and energy into it, and start taking our time and energy and putting it into the ones that they need the help with. Thank you.
And one question, go ahead.
I just second that.
I didn't know whether Yuki has his light on, I didn't want
Do you have anything you want to say? Just because your microphone's.
to. And is that something, to what extent you could do any of this in writing ahead of time? Like, if you took this in the Word document and made any comments like, where it's, say, for example, finance will estimate staffing requirements by November 30, this is last year, and will include them in the budget. Da-da-da, where is that? Done, not done, or finance. So some of, anyway, for me, just how much I take in orally, and if I had something I could look at, if you could give that to us ahead of time. And some of them you may want to, we'll discuss, at meeting and not write something down, but however, to the extent that you can help some of us who, if it's in writing, I take it in a lot quicker.
Yes, I can request from Real Property Tax Administration that we have, that we go through and address a number of these for you. If I can, Margaret, I noticed that you have a nice document that consolidates both the recommendation and the ad hoc committee report. What I've given everybody is the way it came out, which was just the report, and then on the back, we have a spreadsheet that has the recommendation, and then you have to like match up the recommendation back here with the report that's up front. Someone has nicely prepared for you, or perhaps for everyone, that format, and I'm wondering if you have it electronically and could make it available.
Yes, I hadn't realized, maybe that Dave did this, so I have each recommendation and what the ad hoc committee, so that's why it seems so simple to me to go through this, but if you don't have this, the way I have it, it would be a whole long process, so I'd be happy to find out and get this to you, and then it could be just the recommendation, the IC, whatever their IAAO recommendation, ad hoc, and then administration comment, and that you feel free, if you don't want to write something down, that you just say, we'll discuss, but any of them where you can write there, update, then we can review it ahead of time, and it would facilitate that. So I will put that on my homework agenda, and if there's anything else, because Fresh is leaving, I just want you to feel you have the floor, Nancy.
Thank you. I will, my one other item, announcements, I don't have any particular announcement, however, I was, excuse me. Council, not sure where I wrote my notes, but I was going to just offer up, I can send something out announcing the next meeting, but I was going to check with the committee, mention that it would probably be either September 19th or September 26th. And I will have my secretary, Aaron, send that out to each of you to have you check and see what works best for you. But I thought I would go ahead and give you that
19th is
information
going to be a
now.
problem.
Just to let you know, Madam Chair, September 26th, I won't be here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I was going to say the 19th may be a problem, but I'll just, if, I don't want to meet unless Fresh is here, so.
I will also tell you that Mr. Hussey still will not be back and available in September. So it is important for the five of us to find a date when we can meet, and we'll work with that, whatever works with people, to find a date when all five of us can meet.
But what if you're not here? Are you available to meet?
Well, I'm planning to meet until you take council action otherwise,
Okay.
and I doubt that you'll take it that fast, although I don't know. You could have already. But in the course of that, you may be changing the entire nature of the committee, so
What day of the week is the 19th and 26th? Is that a Thursday or Friday?
Thursday. That is, those are both Thursdays.
Those are both
What
Thursdays.
about the 27th?
Well, how about, we will send something out to all of you, giving you an opportunity to give preference even for certain dates, and we'll find something that works for everyone.
And my only question, so I'm glad that you feel that you can stay on this until then, but if at some point you feel, discussing with Lincoln or otherwise, that you feel that you need to resign, then we respect that and we will proceed accordingly, okay? So I appreciate your willingness to be confined to whatever way that it means while you're on this, but that if you do feel you need to resign, then we understand, we'll understand. I do think the others should be asked to resign right away, so.
We'll turn in a formal resignation.
Madam Chair, just one question. So this task force will make recommendations to the council to do some changes. But now, because of now we having this problem, like, looks like September is kind of like, we're not going to be able to do too much, because when does Mr. Hussey get that?
I'm not sure the exact date, but Mr. Hussey would be back for an October meeting.
Okay, so now, during the timeline, because what Mr. Price had mentioned about like December 1st, we need to get something done by then, or to,
There are a lot of things that we can do. Some are legislative and some are not. And actually, I don't, in terms of any legislation related to ag, I probably will make a recommendation that while we be working on that, we are not, depending on what that legislation might be, we're not necessarily trying to meet a deadline this year anyway. That
Oh.
having missed September 1st is significant in my opinion.
oh, okay,
So.
okay, thank you.
Okay, one more question, Nancy. My thought is just sort of thinking about that you said Stephen Hussey can't be here. One thing, when I went through all of this before this meeting, I realized that there are different things that I don't understand what they really are, ratio, this or that. And that's something I expect that Stephen Hussey would understand. We could do that. Or we can just wait and that we're meeting in October and wait and have him here for the first meeting. Yeah, so I'm not, I would, in general, I would appreciate having all of the members here when we're so limited. And so if he is coming back by October 1st, try to get, if there's a date that shortly thereafter, and not I don't like schedule a meeting where we already know ahead of time that somebody that's important is not there. I would not want it done if I couldn't be here.
And I will confirm what is the earliest date he could be available and include that in information to all of you in terms of scheduling the next meeting.
Okay, I think that's good.
Okay, I have a question for Margaret through the chair. Would there be anything against the sunshine law if I went to her office and sat down with her and went through this ahead of time? Instead of waiting, but I'm not saying schedule the meeting ahead of time, but if she has questions on this list, I think I can give her a simple basic, but I didn't know if that would violate the sunshine law by doing that. Thank you.
Well, I will speak only of my understanding of what Mr. Ishida said to us, which is that the two of you can hold a discussion. It does, the more you discuss, the more topics you are limited in your ability to discuss with anyone else. So.
Let me say the kind of things, just opening this, building cost location modifiers, I have no idea. I could just keep going. Ratio, there are a lot of terms. I'm not a tax person. So if no one else has a problem, I'd like to use him as a resource just so I understand.
Well, my only comment would
Or not.
be,
I can add-
you're not the only person here.
Okay. Who
And that
doesn't
needs to be
understand?
explained to everyone on this
Okay.
board.
So let's do
So
it that way.
I think, you could do that, but then it's necessary to repeat that for the other people.
Okay,
who are here
so
anyway.
why don't you teach us all at the same time?
And then, can I make a suggestion, Madam Chair? I guess when Stan and Lisa resigns, then you can go and send an email to them. Okay, because then they won't be on the board anymore, and then they can answer your question. Then that way, we won't, kind of get the other board members into some situations. Yeah.
But maybe what Nancy's saying, and I think is good, that we're really trying to do this as a board so the public stays informed. And if I don't understand it, there are probably others that don't. But it may be, as you said, once they resign, someone like myself that doesn't know things could go through and say, these are all the things I can't even understand what the issue is because I don't know what these terms mean. And then utilize, I'm just trying to, how can we move things forward at the same time? Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? A second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Second.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.
Where are you going anyway? I gotta go to the Parks and Rec.
Thank you for staying, Brett. I appreciate it.